Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. My name is Laurent Mas, co-founder and director of Successful Business Advisors. I'm so pleased to welcome you this morning on the 11th webinar of our New Economy Summit. Last week was a succession of extraordinary speakers from blockchain, fintech, sales, and marketing. So many gifts for everyone and venture capital. So I'm very pleased for today, and I'm going to let David introduce our extraordinary speaker today.
Good morning, everyone. David Jaffe is my name, the co-director with Laurent Mas in Successful Business Advisors. Welcome to today's presentation. As Laurent said, this is the 11th webinar in our series, and up till now we've been presenting mindset and some tools for the business you're in, and today and tomorrow is about the future. And who better than to talk to us about the future than Morris Miselowski. I've been around Morris for over 15, 20 years, and he presented to my clients in the mid-2000s as Twitter was coming out, had just been launched, and asking the question, where to from here? Are we in or are we out? And I've gotten a lot out of Morris's insights, and I'm sure you're all going to get a lot from today's presentation. So welcome, Morris, and thank you very much.
It seems almost impossible today to catch a break. We're not really sure what's happening around us, and you and I are just responding as best as we can. COVID's hit us all. I mean, I know that's an obvious thing to say and an obvious place to start, but it's hard to look ahead without looking at what's happening right now. Over the next little while, I want to take you on a journey through COVID. I want to have a look at its impact and its implications. I want to have a pragmatic look at it, strip away the emotions. I want to show you the industries that are going to rise, the industries that are going to fall, how you and I should approach this conversation, how we should approach our future. My name's Morris Miselowski. I work as a global business futurist, and I've had the joy of doing that for over 3 decades now, working with clients and corporations of all sizes, audiences on stage, in workshop, in boardrooms, and in strategy sessions, talking about the way the world might evolve. For clients and audiences, my best effort is to help them to imagine the world ahead, to stretch their thinking, to see beyond the possibilities of today, and then to give them a pragmatic landscape of the likelihood changes ahead, how technology might change, but more importantly, how people might change, humanity, society, politics, all sorts of things, because we don't live in a linear world. We have lots of things that impact on us at every moment. And it's the understanding of how those things might change into tomorrow and beyond that you and I need to use as our guide for how we grow our businesses. At the moment, as much as I love looking ahead, and I do because I've done projects literally through to the end of this century, I've changed my gaze. Whereas I used to look out for most clients 6, 12, 18, 24 months, and a little bit further for some. We're now talking literally today, tomorrow, next week. In fact, a little bit further down our conversation, I want to show you the 5-week strategy that I've evolved to make sure that even though we can't go much further ahead, that we do justice to every opportunity in the next 5 weeks. But more about that in a little while down the track. Right now, the major takeaway for the morning is that it's not about what changes in the future. It's about what remains constant. I'm going to repeat that. It's not about what changes in the future. It's about what remains constant. And that's been my guiding light ever since I began my strategic foresight work. What I'm talking about there is that the reality that businesses are made up of humans, you and I, you watching this, me talking about this, It's our dreams, our passions, our wishes, and our abilities that grow or collapse a business. What we need to understand to move that business forward is what's its purpose, what's its soul, what's its core, why does it exist? I'm not worried about the products and services that you offer because they change as times change. But in the heart of hearts, in the soul of soul, what is it that your business does? What does it offer? So it's not enough to tell me that you are a locksmith, because a locksmith is just a title. What you're doing is making it easy for people to enter into their properties, to secure their properties. You're offering safety. What you're offering is the ability to make sure that your possessions are safe. All of those things are the core of what you do. Because once upon a time, we had keys. We still might. And we have key locks. But we're moving into a world where that's more electronic. It's done through an app or something that you wear on you that sends a message to the door or to the opening or whatever else it is that you're trying to get into. That's what I talk about with evolving. So the first question for you is really about, at your core, who are you? I've put together an innovation process. It's a really robust 26-chapter set of videos that I'll talk more about towards the end of this conversation. It helps guide you through that process and also the process of innovation, because it's a difficult question, but a really important one to answer. Who are you? At this COVID time, what's happened is that the world has accelerated. A couple of months ago, I was saying in the media that I think that we will have moved forward the equivalent of 5 or 10 years as we leave COVID and go back into whatever this next world looks like. What we've done, you and I, is to accelerate the world. Everything that was not possible, every education conversation I had, every health conversation, every management or resource conversation I had, always had in it. But that's the way we've always done it. We don't have money for that. It's next year's budget. We don't have time or effort. There was always a reason and an excuse for why something couldn't be done. And we kind of rode it, even though I didn't think it was right and I pushed as hard as I could. At the end of the day, that was your decision and I had to respect it. But right now in COVID, literally, on one afternoon, we were told that the world we knew doesn't exist anymore. We were told that we couldn't congregate. We had to go back into our own environments, back into our own homes. We couldn't go to work. We couldn't manufacture unless we were a particular industry, like a health industry. Then we had to remain where we were. And we had no idea what that world looked like. And you and I did the most extraordinary human thing, like that. We changed our world. We went home. We hunkered down. We were afraid, but we kept going. We took out, if it was possible, our laptops and our computers, and where possible, we worked at home rather than from an office. It can't be done, was what I was always told. But there we were doing it. It was imperfect. Nothing was in place. We didn't know how we were going to do it. But you did. You made it as possible as you could. For some, that just wasn't going to be the case. And we had to find alternatives. And the alternative for some came in the form of a government conversation where we began to get money for being at home. That's universal basic income. Again, for 20 years, 30 years, we've talked about the notion of giving people universal basic wages or income. Can't be done, impossible, but look what we did. With health, we were so desperate to make sure that we and our loved ones and those around us were safe. But we couldn't go into a hospital physically. We couldn't go to a doctor. We couldn't tie up resources in that way. So what did we do? Again, the impossible. We made or created e-health, electronic health, and m-health, mobile health. We didn't create it. It's been around and possible for 15 years. If we had to create it, we couldn't have done it in 10 days, which is how long it took for the Australian government to bring in the notion that you and I can see a doctor online, that we can get our medicines through a prescription that's sent from a doctor to a pharmacist. All of that was possible. We just didn't have the communal will, appetite, or desire to bring it to fruition. Look what we can do when we really put our minds to it. That's the lesson I'm hoping we take out of COVID. So for you and I, in this notion, There is a version of us that's pre-corona or pre-COVID. That's who we were before all of this. It was our world. We knew it well. We knew its limitations. We knew what it would create and what we could have out of it. That was our pre-corona world. We had to say goodbye to that in March of this year. Some forever, some put it into hibernation, and some were able to keep working. But that version of ourselves, with whatever we understood of it, is mostly gone because the world has changed and accelerated tremendously since then. We now live in a corona world where you and I have adopted and adapted. We've accelerated a lot of things that weren't possible, the electronic and the digital and the working from home and the multitasking and the ability to educate our children and the ability to understand that, in fact, we could do many things throughout our day and still be productive, that we didn't need to be monitored minute by minute to achieve, that really we should be measured by output, not input. We became the corona version of ourselves. With what we knew and what we had, we were doing the best that was possible. That's who we are at the moment. But also, just on the horizon, we're beginning to see a new version of ourselves, the post-corona or post-COVID version of us. We don't absolutely know what's going to happen, of course, at the other end of corona, whenever that thing is. But we're already sensing that there are changes ahead. We're already testing the boundaries. We're already pushing a bit further ahead. We're beginning to question what it is we did, whether we should continue to do it, and how best to do what we did before in this post-corona environment. We'll talk in just a couple of moments about some industries, some jobs that are rising at the moment that have actually been able to do well out of corona. We'll talk about some that will take a while to come back and have a look at some that might possibly never come back. All of that's on our journey of a post-corona version of ourselves. So our next port of call then is trying to understand this world of corona and what it is that we already see ahead that might give us some of the signals, some of the thoughts, some of the opportunities ahead so that we can begin to build. In the last month or so, there's been a lot of conversations about going back. We've talked about going back to school. We've gone back to work. We've gone back to cafes. We're all hearkening to go back to the world that was pre-COVID, to a pre-March world. As much as we'd romantically love to, it's an impossibility. The world that we worked in before March this year doesn't exist anymore. The products and services that we sold before March this year have changed. The people, you and I, humanity, have changed. Logistics has changed. What we see as important in the world has changed. Our view of how and where when we work has changed. So much has changed so significantly in the last few months that it's impossible for us to go back. So all this conversation that I'm hearing about how do we do it just doesn't make any sense anymore. And I know that's true for you as well, because you've joined me this morning to have a look at how we don't go back, but instead how we go forward, how we take the best of who we once were, who we've had to become through COVID, and blend them together to give us the best version of our future selves and our future businesses. That's our journey in the next little while. I want to walk you through the future of COVID, what it is that we're likely to see ahead as best as we know, show you the good and the bad, be pragmatic about it, not emotional. I want to have a look at how we can stop doom scrolling, how we can get this negativity out of our minds. I know that we are literally walking in it like quicksand mud. But if we're going to make strategic decisions about tomorrow, then we have to take ourselves out of the mud and we have to be thinking differently. So I want to show you the industries that are going to rise, the industries that are currently doing well, and those that might take a little bit longer. I want to do that, firstly, because we need to know that list. But secondly, inside that list are your customers. They are the people that provide things for you. They're the stakeholders. So we really need to understand the humanity and the business structure around what we're likely to see over the next few months and beyond. I also want to share with you a 5-week strategy I developed at the very beginning of COVID that's now being used around the globe with my clients and audiences. It's a way that we can pragmatically respond to what's happening right now. And then what do we do because of it? What are the triggers? What happens next and after next? But anyway, a little bit more about that when we get there in a few moments down the track. I want to also have a look at what's ahead, because the reality is that COVID has distracted us. I know why, I get why. I'm just as distracted as you, but it's distracted us. There are many other things that we would have been talking about had COVID not hit, and they still exist. They're still important, and they are going to reshape the way that we run our businesses, the way we run our lives, society, and humanity. And that would have been despite COVID. COVID has in many ways just accelerated that conversation. So that's our journey for the next while. At the end of it, I'm going to leave plenty of time for our conversations and chats. So as we work our way through the material, can I get you to pop down at the bottom of the screen your Q&As and your chats? If you send them through, let's talk about them when we get to the other end of this presentation. And then together we can explore what's important to you. So now, let's continue on the journey. So as we begin to make sense and purpose out of this COVID and figure out what it is we might have to do ahead, the first thing we need to do is dispel a couple of myths. Firstly, this getting back to normal just doesn't exist. I don't know about you, but I couldn't think of anything worse than being normal or average. You and I are unique. Our businesses are unique. Every single moment of every day, even if we didn't recognize it, we were doing unique and different things. The reality is that what you and I are looking for now is not normal. We're looking for a rhythm, a rhythm. You and I have always lived our life in a rhythm. Things feel right. We go with the flow. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's uncertain, it's part of a rhythm. That's what we're looking for. And moving out of COVID, I think it's ever more important to understand that normal cannot exist, because we're going to come across so many different opportunities, so many different hurdles, and you and I are going to have to react to them. And that's the world we're moved into anyway. We're now all living proof that we can change, and we will now change more often than we have ever been comfortable doing it before. So rhythm is the first thing. And you and I will have multiple rhythms throughout our day as we go from our work to our family to our leisure and pleasure, as we play sport, as we move into the next day. The other thing we need to dispel is that the reality is that these are not unprecedented times. Of course, COVID is, of course, what we're reacting to is, but humanity throughout our millenniums have been faced with calamities. We have lived through them. We have been battered by them. We have been reshaped by them. They have been horrible, and we have never wished them upon ourselves or anybody else. But we have had these calamities before. We've had the bubonic plague. We've had Spanish flu. We've had cholera and tuberculosis. We've had all sorts of things which were terrible and heinous, but we lived through them. We will live through this, which is why I refuse to say it's unprecedented. Of course, what we're reacting to is, but the fact that we can do it and overcome it is part of the psychology of why we're speaking together this morning that we need to take forward. The psychology is that it's difficult, but it was never going to be easy. And you and I are capable of making the difficult decisions to get us forward. So they're the first two pieces out of this. The next thing we need to understand is that this is not a linear event. This is not something that's going to happen and disappear. Even with the best of intention, the world is going to be reacting to COVID for a little while moving forward. We've heard a lot about this curve. All I've heard for the last couple of months is curves. The reality is that this curve is not a U-curve. This is not something we're going into in like a slippery dip. We're going to slide down and come up the other end. I hope that's what happens. But my reality is, from speaking to researchers and others around the globe who, again, don't know more than anybody else, but just have a more pragmatic view of it, is that we are into a W curve. The reality is that, like a roller coaster, this is going to go up and down. Just when we least think it, it's going to affect and hit us. And we've seen that over the last week or two. And we will find times where it will quieten down and we will hope it's gone away, and we'll look over our shoulder and hopefully we won't see it. But then it might come up and rise again. The reality is that doing business physically around the globe is going to take us the best part of a year and beyond to get back to. We will start flying again internationally. We'll be within pockets, within regions, and we'll do that in the next 6 months or so. The borders of Australia will begin to open internally over the next month or two as well. It will not be perfect, but we will do it anyway. So we will see this steady rise, this steady change over the next year or so. we're also going to see the reality that Australia is once again going to have to understand it's a frontier. It is possible for us to make changes and to live a world just on this continent, and we're beginning to see reactions and possibilities of that. This slide that we're looking at the moment speaks to that scenario. It speaks to me of the scenario that we are likely to go into a W curve. Again, that roller coaster of taking us up and down, that we will over the next while be hit by different circumstances. And again, that's why I think that 5-week strategy we're going to talk about in just a couple of moments is so imperative to have in our back pocket, ready to go. No surprise, we've lived through this already, but just let's summarize what's happening. There are businesses that have gone into major decline. The industries around booking and travel agents, around entertainment and live events, around airlines, around cruise ships and hotels, all of those what are called beach industries are now having to realign and repurpose themselves. We're seeing horrendous and monumental changes in all of those industries. Those industries will have to evolve quite hard and quite differently. They will have to be stripped back often to their core. And for many, unfortunately, they will not survive. For most, when they come back, their post-COVID self will be significantly different. But again, the core of what they offer is exactly the same. I'm working with a hotel group at the moment, and that's exactly what we're asking ourselves. We know what we can't do. We can't open our doors in the way we once did. We can't be hospitable in the way we once were. We can't go up and shake people's hands. The rooms need to be very different in the way that they're laid out in our experiences of us. But we know that we're coming back. We know the buildings will once again have people in them. What we're planning right now is a slow release of activities and rooms. We're talking about the reality that at this stage, people want a bit of escape. If we can provide them with surety that the rooms are safe and secure, they're hygienic, they are in fact a great place for them to have a staycation, then we can offer them opportunities within the hotel. We can put bands in the hotel, we can have event nights, we can do all kinds of things that give people an opportunity just to take a breather from their external life, feel pampered as much as possible, feel included in a different sort of community, even though they physically can't be together, and enjoy some experiences that perhaps in other ways may not yet be possible. Everything can be done if we can reimagine and repurpose, even in these most difficult of industries. And what we're starting to see now is that industries that took a deep breath, that went into a small hibernation, are now slowly beginning to poke their head out. We're beginning to wonder and ponder what the world ahead looks like for them, because they are becoming necessary again and possible for us to interact with. We've got removalists and relocations, repairs and maintenance, robotics and drones, auto car repairing. We've got lipsticks and beauty, flour and chocolates. Insolvency, unfortunately, is another industry that's going to rise. We also have the notion of debt collection, again, a result of what we're seeing behind us moving forward. There are all sorts of industries that are literally on the cusp of coming back and rising. For each one of those, again, the conversation of how do you evolve, how do you take the best out of who you were and become this new version of yourself. Apart from our individual responses to COVID and the changes in industry that we've just had a look at, there are also some other changes ahead that I sense are coming for us. One is that as we move into September and October of 2020, that the world will become difficult from a financial viewpoint. A lot of the programs that are offering money will have stopped. There will be opportunity or need then to start repaying more debt as banks call that in. There will be a squeezing of some industries and some businesses. That's a reality, and you and I need to get ready right now for that reality. We need to make sure that we are shored up. We need to make sure that we have the resources to be able to guide ourselves and our people and our businesses through the next year. There is also, moving alongside of this, all sorts of political upheavals as we're beginning to change what we see and what we think is important. We're seeing societal change, like Black Lives Matter, which of course they do. We're seeing Me Too still being a conversation, as it must be. This is all a reaction to something really interesting. What's interesting about it is where it's coming from. It's coming from the human desire that we need to be safe and we need to be secure. If Maslow's theory is something you've talked about before, it's the base triangle of that. And Maslow simply talks about a hierarchy of needs of humans. I've argued in the last while and built strategy around the thought that right now and for the next few months, we are back to the base level. We are back to making sure that we as humans feel safe, secure, and that we are doing all around us to ensure that that's a reality. That's why things that we once accepted and never should have are now being called to question, thankfully and finally. All of the injustices of the world that we once allowed to skip by us and only a few voices were loud enough for us to hear, we now as an orchestra, as a choir, are standing up to say, this is not right, change it. These are responses to our hygiene and our safety needs. They're also important from your business viewpoint, because what this tells you is that your business needs to be shouting a message of it being safe and it being secure. Customers right now are looking to deal with businesses that understand COVID, that have gone through the challenges, that have risen through those challenges, where safety and security are part of what they do. If there's a physical manifestation, that they're showing that they're cleaning their hands, that they're cleaning the rooms, that the products are wrapped, whatever it is. If not, if it's a service, that they have said to their customers and their stakeholders in the world around them that they are prepared for change, they are evolving with change, they have changed their processes, they've gone online. Whatever it is, you and I as customers are looking for that safety and understanding. As businesses, we have to be providing it. We also have huge political upheaval for exactly the same reason, that what we're looking for now is some kind of surety. It's very easy to strip it back to this one level, and yes, it's a much more complex, much more diverse conversation, and I'd love to have that with you if you want to have it at some later stage. But for now, for our strategic thinking forward, please ensure that you have heard the messages of COVID, and I know you have, taken the best of who you were before, and now your marketing, your sales, your conversations are human-centric and geared towards ensuring people that you are in it for the long haul with them, that you will provide all of the safety and security that you possibly can around your product and service to ensure that their lives can be as fruitful as possible in the conditions that we're all facing. That's the next thing that you need to do to make sure that you are ready to take advantage of the post-COVID world. All of these things that are colliding together, the politics, the technology, the changing in humanity, the changing in religious beliefs, all of those things were conspiring before COVID. What's happening now is that it's accelerating. It's happening much faster. We've proven to ourselves that we can cope with change, and it's part of that higher order. Make sure that's part of your communication, part of your marketing, and part of the way that you are approaching the world of tomorrow, because we as consumers will accept no less. What you and I need to be demonstrating right now is a great amount of trust, that we can be trusted, because it is the number one trigger. I did a piece about a month or so ago with Elliot Epstein, who I think is one of the best sales and communication trainers on the planet. And we talked about the reality of selling in a COVID and post-COVID world. I'd love you to go and have a look at that podcast, about 20 minutes. And the two of us really got into what it is to sell in a COVID world, how to approach customers, what they're looking for, what the cues are, and how to find your customers of tomorrow. A great little podcast. Love you to jump over to my website and have a look at it. The address is just under here for you to do that. In that world, we talked about trust, and this is what we need to do to manufacture trust. That's not to say that we're not trustworthy. We just need to give great lashings of it to the outside public. We need to make them absolutely aware of it, because it's what we as consumers, again, are all craving to do. We're not sure who to trust or what to trust. We need our companies, we need those that we're dealing with to say overtly, you can trust us, here's the evidence. So here are 4 key drivers, and I'd love you to have a look at each of them. Again, this video will be available for you to have a look at in more detail just after we've finished our recording today. But what we're talking about here is 4 elements, 4 places where you can really dial up that trust factor, make people aware of it. We've travelled through what COVID's meant to us. We've had a look at some of the implications and applications of COVID, some of the industries that are rising and falling. The question really now is, how do we take ourselves forward? And this strategy document is something that I put together at the beginning of COVID based on 30 plus years of guiding corporations, individuals, and all sorts of startups through the process of looking ahead. It talks about the reality that at zero, something's happened. The world's changed, the government's given us more or less of the ability to do something, or there's been some health concern, whatever it is, something's triggered a change. What do we do now? What do we react first with? What is it about our business that we need to do, about our people? And that's what the weeks 0 to 2 talk about. The next part of this strategy is 2 to 5 weeks. A little bit of surety now. We've had a couple of weeks. The world hasn't changed too dramatically since a couple of weeks ago. We've evolved, we've changed, and we kind of have a lay of the land. So 2 to 5 weeks talks about, with that kind of a more sure footing, what decisions should we be making now? What should we be looking at? What things do we begin to do? What do we get rid of? What do we implement more of? How do we change our products and services so they are better fitting towards tomorrow? So weeks 2 to 5 takes you through that process. The third part of the strategy, 5 weeks, talks about the reality that if it has eventuated that we got to this spot, that the world has some certainty around it. Not complete certainty, but it's been fairly status quo for over a month. We're now asking ourselves some really more stringent questions about who we are and what do we do moving forward. What have we learned? What policies and practices have we evolved? How have we changed our products and services? How have our people changed? It asks us all of those questions and forces us to look at how we might use that moving forward and what else we still might need to have achieved. At my website, there's a video that goes into far more detail about this 5-week strategy. It takes you through literally step by step, stage by stage, and explains what to do at each one of these. I'd love you to go back after our conversation today and explore that in more detail. One of the questions I've got asked a lot over the last couple of weeks and months is this notion of manufacturing. Of course, because we can't get things from overseas as we once did, because we can't travel overseas to organise the manufacturing of whatever products they are, and because it's still difficult to get products from overseas. We've begun to ask ourselves the questions of what manufacturing might be possible back in Australia. Manufacturing's been a really difficult discussion in Australia over the last 3 or 4 decades, as we've seen it slowly disappear overseas, mostly around the notion of cost. What we've seen over the last decade or so is really this notion of mixed manufacturing, where the bulk of what we actually buy is manufactured overseas, but there are elements of it that have maintained and retained themselves in Australia. There are also various methods of manufacturing, but one of the ones that we're talking about now is the notion of COVID shoring or COVID manufacturing. And that's the immediate reaction to the fact that you and I, as consumers, now need goods and we can't get them. So is it possible to manufacture them in Australia? And we've seen many manufacturers retool themselves who once might have done perhaps cars, who are now doing something very different, who once might have perhaps done clothing or women's clothing like Fella Hamilton, who is now producing surgical gowns and surgical masks. We're having manufacturers look at their tooling and their plants and say, well, what else can we do? And we're also seeing small micro manufacturing coming back into the realms where people aren't perhaps doing vast volumes, but small volumes specific to a need. Those are elements we can take forward out of COVID. That is a possibility for manufacturing in Australia. We're going to have about a year or so where our manufacturing, our importing, our exporting is really lumpy and bumpy. This is a perfect time to prove the case that we can manufacture here. So have a look around you. If that's the world that you're in, see what you can do now to bring manufacturing, maybe not all of it, but some of it, or maybe in a different way or to a different marketplace. But all of that is possible right now. So our discussion so far, rightly so, has been about COVID and how we work through COVID and make the opportunities to be able to take our business forward. But I wouldn't be doing my job as a business futurist if I didn't try and provoke you to think a bit broader and a bit more wildly. I want to show you through just a few of the horizon epochs. So some of the things that I'm talking to my clients about, that regardless of whether COVID would have come along or not, are going to influence who we are as human beings. The first of these is the autonomous age, the reality that our technology, which has been with us for over 30 years, is now becoming sophisticated enough to do routine thinking for us. It's making base decisions. Now, before that alarms you, many of us are using Google Maps. And with Google Maps, we're not only entering in the address that we want to go to, but we're accepting that along the way, we might be diverted. That our app will tell us that there's traffic, or that there's an accident, or that something's happened along the traditional way that we might have gone, and therefore turn left or turn right. The autonomous era speaks to that. It speaks about a home that understands who you are when you come in and what you need, or a car that might understand that you are not feeling well and can pull over ever so slowly to the side and save you from an incredible accident. The autonomous age is part of a tomorrow landscape. Again, even though that we are walking through the mud of COVID, we should allow just a little crack of looking forward into these incredible possibilities, so that when we begin to plan for tomorrow, there are just edges along our strategy, which take into account the move towards something like this. We also have the reality, and as proven by COVID so elegantly, if it did anything, it did this. It moved us all from a centralized way of thinking where there was only one way to work, one way to shop, one way to go to school, one way for health, and we all went and did that size 9 shoe activity. Decentralized is the reality, and it's been possible for a long time, but now a proven certainty that you and I can have distributed healthcare. The doctor can come to us through a digital conversation, that we can shop online and shop in store, that what we're doing is now choosing the circumstance and the way that we are capable of interacting with it and desiring to have that transaction. There is no better or worse, physical or digital. In fact, they're one and the same. They're just human experiences that allow us to fulfill a need. Decentralized means that we're hyper-personalizing the experience, that we're increasingly saying you as a consumer can have it in whatever way you want, delivered to wherever you want, in whatever sense and shape makes sense to you. This is also part of a strategy that I've been talking to clients about for the last few years. And with proven cases now over the last few months, I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about as we plan our strategy into the end of COVID and way beyond. The other incredible shift that's happening on the planet as we speak, again, regardless of COVID or not, is 5G technology. The ramping up of the possibility and capability of our devices and all of those inanimate objects on the planet. 5G allows us to connect up to have faster speed, to be able to download and upload as we might do on broadband or on cable in our streets. The reality is that we can now hook up our homes, our cars, our objects. We can now interact. We can now put sensors into streets that tells it that there are many cars on the road that need to change the traffic conditions. Rubbish tins with sensors in them can now send out a call to be emptied. Streets which have issues with them can now literally send out a message to the local council or repair person to come and repair it. Our homes know that we are about to enter it and what it needs to do to get itself ready for us to be able to do what we want to do. 5G heralds in all of these possibilities and so much more. Again, another horizon trend that's well worth you taking just a moment to think about its extension and possibilities for your business and services. And the last of our conversations for today of possible future horizon trends that are poking their head out regardless of COVID or not is machine learning and artificial intelligence. The reality, again, over the last few decades is that not only is our technology capable of getting information, receiving information, but increasingly now making sense out of it, of taking all of that information, all of that data, and figuring out perhaps ahead of us what we need and what we want. It's an era or technology that will evolve over the next years and decades. It will be part of our lives, and we should ask the hard questions about whether we want it, how and where and when. But again, another conversation for another day. Right now, for you and I, as business owners, it's about the reality that our forward-thinking strategy must include this, regardless of what our business is, regardless of what we do. These are just some of the thoughts that I'm asking you to keep in the back of your mind as you work your way through COVID, and again, react and do what you need to do to help you to survive and those around you to thrive. We always need to be thinking forward. We always need to be thinking about the next step and beyond. That's what we do as business owners. COVID has definitely thrown us a curveball. We will react, and we are, but we need to go much deeper and further. This is a chance to say that the world that we once had suited us then. It doesn't suit us now. COVID has certainly forced us to rethink and reshape who we are and who our businesses are. I'm hoping that we can take positive lessons out of this most incredible period of time. There's much for us to learn. We have, despite ourselves, shown that we're capable of change. We've shown that we can evolve. We have accelerated the pace of possibilities, and we have learned that anything is possible if we want it to be. So here's the unashamed plug. I've been looking at innovation for the last 30 plus years, working with corporations around the planet, helping individuals to ensure that they're always forward facing and always taking first advantage of what might be ahead. Over the last little while, I've been asked to put together a program that encapsulates all of that possibility and all of the work around how to understand who a business is, what it is, what it's capable of, and what it needs to do. How a business, how you learn where innovation comes from, where you find innovation from, how you capture it, how you control and manipulate it so that that innovation, that thought, becomes a possibility for you, how you embed it into your company and corporation, and how it is that you make sure that that thought, that innovation, that new product, that new service, that new way of doing something is profitable for you into tomorrow, that it makes sense for you to do it, that all of your people, both inside and outside of your company, are ready and willing and able to do what you need it to do. This is the Futurist Innovation Toolkit that I've put together, and it's available at my website. I'd love you to go and have a look at it. It's a 4-month program that will take you through step by step everything you need to do, from literally being unsure about what innovation is to being an innovation ninja. 26 chapters, 26 videos, all encapsulated, all incorporated in that space. And part of that joy is that you and I will get to spend time together one-on-one working through your specific issues. So thank you again for taking the time this morning to join me to have a look at COVID, and more importantly, our reactions to it, how you and I as business owners can survive and thrive through it, what we need to be mindful of and careful of. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. It's been an incredible privilege to be able to take you through some of the conversations that I'm having around the world. Now, the most important conversations are still ahead. So, over to you. What is it that you want to talk about?
Wow, what an extraordinary presentation, Maurice. Thank you so much. It's fabulous, and already people are, the questions are flowing like Hudson River. So first question from Michelle. Can you provide one nugget of gold regarding innovation for SMEs moving forward in a world that is evolving beyond our current understanding?
Great question, Michelle. For me, the answer's a really obvious one, but I think an important one, because it's something that we haven't done for a long time, and that is to fixate on humans. For far too long, we've been talking about technology, we've been talking about new widgets, new gadgets, ways that we can do things better. What's been happening over the last year or two, and especially accelerated through COVID, is the reality that now humanity more than ever matters. It really is about hyper-personalizing. For me, whenever I'm working on an innovation strategy or conversation, I'm mapping through the customer experience. I'm mapping through the internal staff experiences. I want to figure out where humans are stumbling in the conversation to work with me or to buy from me. And I want to eradicate those as much as possible. I know there's technology that can do it. I know there's systems and protocols, but all of those are secondary. We will find those. We'll only find them, though, if we do understand the human behind all of those needs, behind all of those activities and the needs they have.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you very much, Michel, for this question. Pei Young say, hi, Maurice. Thank you for sharing. Danny as well, saying thank you. Thank you from Maurice. Thank you, Maurice, from Robert. Michel saying truly inspired by your presentation, Maurice. One question from Pei Young. What do you think is important for basic universal income to be accepted and taken up?
It's a really difficult question to answer in just one thought. Universal basic income really requires us as humanity to understand that it's not disabling. In fact, it's enabling. It's being used, or versions of it are being tried in Sweden, in Finland and other places. What it speaks to is the reality that every human that lives within that space, so in our example, every human that lives in Australia, has access from birth to death to a sum of money. And what she or he does with that is their own notion. They can earn more if they wish, and they can go and find a job and a career. For those that are unable to earn more money, because they're disinfirmed, disabled or whatever, the government could top that up. But it doesn't speak to a notion or a world where we're all going on holidays all week. I actually think it's an imperative. One of the issues that I'm absolutely certain about that we're going to see in a couple of decades is that we will not have enough work for everybody. We're moving into a future world somewhere around 2050, where our population will be somewhere over 10 billion people. 80% of those will be middle class. Work as we knew it is not going to suffice, is not going to be enough. One of the things that's happened in COVID is, in fact, we've restructured or beginning to restructure or re-understand what work is and strip it back from a number of activities to a single task. And perhaps we can do a number of tasks and have what's referred to as portfolio income. So again, there are lots of thoughts running around there. There's not a clear answer, but it comes back to a notion of society seeing it as being something worthwhile, not negative. Understanding that as a future course, it most likely will be something that we will have to address head on in the next few decades, looking how we can still incentivize and ask people to continue to be fulfilled, because as humans we need that. And also it requires us to rethink what work might be so that we can all undertake some activity. We all need to be stimulated. We all need to be earning. We all need to have a purpose for getting up in the morning. So there are lots of things that need to come into focus to make a universal basic wage or income possible. But I think it's a noble cause and definitely something for the decades for us to discuss.
Fantastic. Thank you, Maurice. Thank you from Ashok. And another question from Pei Young. Thank you, Pei Young. What do you feel is most needed and critical right now by most people around the world?
Good leadership. We really need a very clear direction of where it is we're going and what we're going to do.
Anything else?
At the moment, and this is not a criticism of any government, it's not a criticism of any government or any politics. It's just that we for a few weeks as humans took a deep breath and we listened to what we were told, and we did all the listening to messaging. We're now not doing it. I'm sensing that what we need is more, we need that statesman, somebody who stands up and says, look, the world is not perfect. Don't kid yourself that it is. This is what we need to do. These are the things you need to do.
Yeah. So true. Thank you. Correct. Thank you very much. Another question from Michel. How do you see the future of blockchain? Thank you, Michel, for this question. Maurice?
So blockchain to me underpins everything we talk about in the digital future world. It's not so much about blockchain, but the reality that we're seeing, and again, I keep saying that through our conversation, but I've said it a lot in the last couple of months, the acceleration of a less cash society, it talks to blockchain as well. What blockchain allows us to do is to digitize money, and it allows us to pay for things across the planet in real time. One of the things that was slowly on the horizon was that we were beginning to pay in micro payments. We were beginning to pay in small bits of money for things that we did or for things that we might do for others. All of that kind of lives inside blockchain. The other thing that's going to change in the next 5 years, maybe sooner, is because of this digitized world, we're moving into a realm of legal smart contracts, which are an online space where a contract now is a physical document written between parties who agree to it, and it's a static document we only go back to in bad times. A contract of the future will actually be a framework. It will be a digital framework where all the parties will engage inside of that. And that's not just the person, for instance, who's renting and the landlord, but also the utility companies, the water companies, the couriers, the insurance companies. Everybody agrees to digitally live inside that contract online. I know it sounds unusual, but this is where we're headed. In that space, everybody has transparency of what's happening to each other to the level of authority that they've been given. And in those spaces, because of blockchain, we can send micro payments backwards and forwards, we can send documents backwards and forwards, and we can be secure about all of those transactions. There's a very, very different world coming up ahead for us, and blockchain underpins the ability to be able to make surety. We talked about trust before, to have trust and be sure about this future landscape.
Very good. Thank you very much, Maurice. Great question from Michel. Another question from Michel. You have touched on the future of work. Should we not perhaps review our current perceptions of work? That's the question, and I'm going to finish the sentence. Should we not be working towards shaping the future of work for our children and children's children?
Absolutely. So this is where everybody clears their calendar for the rest of the day, because that's how long it's going to take. The reality is, of course, we have to do that. We've always had to do that. I've said to you already in this conversation that I don't believe the notion of work that we are leaving behind us was worthwhile. I think it really has not been worthwhile for a decade or so. And I rallied really hard that for the next decade and beyond, we had to reshape and reshift what work was. A couple of things that we're fairly certain about is that for many of our children, they will live to 100 or 120. They will have to have some sort of income capacity into the hundreds and beyond. I've already said to you that the world's population is going to increase over the next 30 or 40 years, and it's likely to increase up to about 2070, 2080 is what we're told, where universally we'll hit that peak population and then slowly start to come down in numbers. So in the next while, we are going to have people who are older, people who don't want to retire in the traditional way that we once wanted them to, and we can't have them retire anyway because we require them to do things, to work, to provide income, to pay taxes, to be vital citizens. At the age of 70 and 80, I'm not suggesting that we're going to be working and toiling with a shovel in our hand unless we want to, but I am saying that we will want to be stimulated, we will want to have some kind of income production, that we'll want to feel a part of a broader community. The way of work also is changing, moving away from a job description into more of a task portfolio. I firmly believe that our children who are finishing school now will have most likely a central set of skills and abilities, and they will apply or sell those tools in lots of ways. So they will likely have one central set of activities, what we might call a job now, but they'll also be able to do lots of other tasks and do other income and use other skill sets that they might have not been able to in a traditional sense. So they might enjoy finance and go into a world of numbers, but also enjoy being out and about. So maybe they also do some landscaping once in a while, or they're also a fitness instructor. Now, these things aren't contradictory. They're about that human fulfilling her or himself, allowing all of their talents to blossom and making money or making some sort of income. And the income might not be money, it might be a sense of satisfaction, a sense of well-being, or a sense of giving back in the philanthropy sense. All of those things speak to a future world of us working. And this experiment of the last few months proves we can do it. Because we're home, for many, we're working, we're also looking after kids, we're also doing a bit of gardening, we've cooked more than we ever have before. We're still able to do everything.
Maurice? Maurice? Okay. Cynthia, apologize everyone.